Welcome to the State of the Game. This is the podcast, Twitch stream / podcast, where we talk about, well, everything DAoC. So the first thing is, let's get into the Mithril bonuses. This was promised back in 1.127. New monthly Mithril bonuses added to all subscription packages. So this is now live. For 1 month subs, you get 100 bonus Mithril every month. For 3 months, you get 125 bonus Mithril. And for 6 plus months, so 6 or more months, you get 150 Mithril every single month. Do I think they could have gone a little bit bigger? Sure, I do. But, I mean, face it, I don't think there's a number that would be, too big for most of us. I do like the idea, just strictly for their business, just for cash flow. Like, these sub-tiers increase over the course of like what the duration of the sub is, or the free Mithril. I think that's a great idea, and maybe it'll drive people to commit to 6-month subs. Broadsword isn't really hurting, at least in my opinion, isn't really hurting for subs. I don't see the there. There are a ton of people who are subbed to this game that don't play for whatever reason. They just don't play. I couldn't tell you why. AOL had like millions of subscribers paying for dial-up well after they had received in-home broadband. Everybody's itching for a reason to come back. And with some of these new changes, the promise of a new server, we can talk a little bit about the new server too, for those who are new. So, monthly Mithril bonus is great. I'm a big fan of this. I blow through a lot more than 100 Mithril a month, or even 150 Mithril a month. But any little bit counts, and if they're giving it to me and I'm paying for the accounts already, let's talk a little bit about the dynamic adjustments. I have a lot to say about this. The protection obelisk and keep upgrade system was something that we talked about. I'll talk about that in a second, because I've got some opinions now that I've seen it in action. We'll talk about climbing spikes. The thing that I completely missed, was the relic guard dynamic scaling. So they've changed the guards that protect the relics and the relic keeps. This I completely glanced over on December 17th when all of this was announced. And I don't know if you guys have opinions on this, but from my perspective, I think that makes a lot of sense. I also don't see relics being super relevant right now. I have a tough time seeing how relics make a huge difference. You absolutely can get a damage bonus, whether it's magic or physical damage. You can absolutely get that with a relic. And a realm that holds all 6 relics, generally speaking, receives some kind of psychological bonus. It's not something that Broadsword hands out. Having all 6 relics, at least I think in the case of Alb, and maybe Mid too. Mid, we've proven that that's the case. Definitely Alb, and I think to a certain extent Hib. Although Hib's kind of a weird example because of the representation on Hib, both EU and US primetime. I just don't see relics being as big of a bonus to people, but they make a difference. And when Albs have their relics, more log in. When they don't, less Albs log in. When Legan ran that relic raid, it was probably now 2 months ago. Almost immediately, Mid saw a population increase. And I do tie that to, well, one, Legan's hard work in trying to get that BG rolling. And off the ground, but more specifically, I think because they had a huge successful relic raid that went well. I'm gonna say some things that aren't super popular right now, and I really hope you'll bear with me. Since the protection obelisk came out, since Broadsword released this, there has been a lot of tension and a lot of drama, and I've been dragged through the drama. I don't know why. I'm not an employee of Broadsword. I just stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. Like, that's literally my involvement in this. I'm just a player, just a streamer. And while we might have a significantly large presence, and while I think my relationship with Broadsword is great, I don't make decisions for them. I'm not the person that you come to and, like, argue points, right? And when I've had people come to me over the last last week, less than a week, talking to me about how this is unfair, all I've done is repeated the points on how to counter it, or how you can get in there and essentially negate this protection obelisk from being in there in the first place. So the climbing spike thing, let's just go down this one by one. Climbing spike adjustment, fine. When this was announced initially, I made a comment that I thought that the climbing spikes, the reuse timer going from 60 seconds to 180 seconds might need to even go a little bit further than that. But you know what? It's okay. It seems to be all right. The 15% additional damage is also fine, as far as I'm concerned. Although I haven't seen that in action, and I don't know the mechanics of it. I don't know exactly how that works when it comes to people climbing into a keep, whether they can pop the climbing spikes and sit, and maybe you guys can tell me, whether they can pop the climbing spikes and sit on a climb point and just wait 45 seconds. So Borgio says they can cooldown starts as you activate. Okay, so there's a little bit of a workaround to that, whatever. Climbing wasn't really the issue. It makes it a little bit more difficult, but in the last 6 months, I've seen albs and mids pull together great groups and push those climbers out, which is the reason why you're hearing these climbers now, and a lot of climbers have expressed to me complaints about the fact that they can't get back in fast enough. They were already being driven out in the first place. So this is great. The protection obelisk is a whole different animal. This only affects people that are on the roof, Lord Room, or Inner Oil. That's it. So this notion that it somehow changes the dynamics of a fight on the first floor or on the banister / balcony, whatever you want to call it, to me is nonsense. And the only thing it changes, and again, just my 10 cents, maybe not 2 cents, but 10 cents, is that the people who are really complaining, the people who are really upset about this are hip casters. They can no longer charge in, and this is coming from somebody who plays Hib, like that's my home realm, full-time job on Hib. They can't just push in and stun nuke everything down on the roof. And they're upset about that. Well, I have news for the people that are upset. This is what every BG has had to deal with, has dealt with, since day one. Since day one. Every BG has had to deal with, or has dealt with, the bad English strategy, right? Looking around, trying to figure out what the situation is, making decisions when you're inside of a keep based on, what your observations are. It's no longer that you can just push in and kill stuff and just not think about it. BG leaders on all 3 realms maybe since the beginning of the game have thought about strategy and ways in which they can push in. And now Hibs, there are some Hibs, not all Hibs, but there are some Hibs that are really upset. I haven't heard any complaints from any mids or any albs yet. Maybe there are some, but I haven't heard anybody yet say that. The other thing is this notion that it makes that this protection obelisk makes it more difficult to take keeps in general. Again, the facts don't point in that direction. They just don't. There's, as Toonza says in Twitch chat, strategery. And as I've explained this to BG leaders, I'm not going to name names, but I've explained them to BG leaders. I've explained this to people that have run in my BG, and I've spoken to people on all 3 realms. You have to go in. If it's not heavily defended, none of this matters. And frankly, most of the situations where this helps is where realms are they don't have an organized defense. It just doesn't change anything. And if you've got a heavy defense, look at what we did tonight. Or last night even. I think last night was a better example. Maybe not tonight, because we didn't really take a keep tonight with defenders. But last night, we took a keep with a few inside, not many. And it was a matter of going up, clearing the balcony first or the banister, leaving a group or 2 at the bottom of that stairway going up to the Lord Room, making sure that you're holding that area as best you can, and then sending everybody else down, or a tank group or a caster group or whatever. As long as they're not being pushed on or being interrupted, it's easy peasy. And take down the protection obelisk. Should have taken says, I find the buff to be more helpful against siege than anything. I still get stun nuked and die on the roof. Yeah, it's very helpful with siege. It depends on what time of day I think you're running on and who's attacking. But you can still kill people on the roof. And there were a few people that took something I said way out of context yesterday. I was told that 4 or 5 casters maybe 6, I don't know, maybe it was a full group. Let's just say it was a full group of casters. Could not assist train down one target on the roof of a keep. And my response was, bring another group. Get another group to assist. What do you want me to say? That just stinks. I'm so sorry. Like, what do you want a solution to the problem? Bring another group. And then today I was hearing that people were saying that somehow I suggested that you need 2 groups of people to take down one person on a roof. That's just not true. You can do it with 3 or 4 people. If you've got an assist train with a debuffer. Borgio says in chat, I got debuffed and assist nuked on the inner oil tonight on my warrior and was taking serious damage. It's still possible with good assisting. And what does that require? It requires coordination amongst BG groups. Or just in a group. It requires good group composition. You can't just form pug groups left and right and expect them to form an assist train. The other thing I said was, in my opinion, the best way to hold a roof in that situation is to just annoy the crap out of them. Send your amnesias, send your nearsights, send CC, whatever you've got that's, frankly, bolt range is best. Bolt range AoE. And just bug them. Just bug the crap out of them. Frankly, you should be doing something like amnesia that doesn't give them immunity, so that if you get inside and you do inevitably push up, they have immunity then to a mez or a stun or whatever. You should be ideally doing something that doesn't give them immunity, but this does not change. I'm sorry, it just does not change the game. Now, are there little quirks about this protection obelisk? Yes. There is an area right at the top of the stairs where you can, if you're on a race of a class that's tall enough, literally, you need to be like a Celt or a Furby or whatever, I'm sure a Highlander would be fine, a Troll would be fine, whatever class that's taller than just like your Little Britain, Little Lurie, Little Kobe, you can heal the protection obelisk. With the 50% or whatever percentage buff that's up, the protection buff, you can still get to it. And I checked with Broadsword yesterday, and that is as intended. There are little quirks like that. There's also the quirk where you can refresh the buff, and it's up for 20 seconds. And if you refresh it from the Lord, as far as I can tell, that first tick, it doesn't do any height access checks. I think it seems, and I could be wrong about this, could be totally wrong, but just based on what I've seen, it's the second tick onward that, or the end of that first tick, second tick onward that checks against height. And so if you're literally in the middle of a second tick, it can drop if it doesn't agree with where you are specifically in the keep. But you can absolutely refresh on the Lord, jump out, and you've got 20 seconds. They could change that. But there are ways around this. And the idea that it somehow affects, it's just a matter of communication. And I'm just a little tired of hearing people complain about how this ruins their day. And that's with all due respect. And with Herorius, who has tried this new thing and doesn't like it, and has been very vocal about not liking it, much respect, Phil. I respect your views. I'm not trying to invalidate how you feel or what you're saying, but it doesn't actually affect gameplay for pushing in and taking a keep. The only thing it does is it prevents people from taking down the inner oil, which is fine if you've got champs, right, on Hib. Minis or Scalds, right, depending on what realm you're on, because you're not taking a ton of damage anyway. And it affects the casters that are setting up in those towers that are looking onto the roof. Also, the idea that fumble storms. There was this thing where mids dropped tons of fumble storms. I guess it was day 1, the first fight, on the obelisk, ground floor. And the Hibs couldn't hit it. But Stormlords can push those out of the way. I'm sorry. It just doesn't change a whole lot. It really doesn't. Strategery. Should have taken says the murder hole that is that overlooks the ram from the inner is your limit on the stairs. Why is there a 200 plat cap? So Gear Bunny Classic says, character's money in game is stored in a single long int variable and is treated by every economic system as straight copper. There are ways around this 200 plat limit. Mansion deeds. Borgio says it. Yeah, buy mansion deeds. That's it. It's mansion deeds. 25 plat a pop. They're really I'm not going to call it the underground currency, but that is, if people are trading plat, that's really how they do it, is mansion deeds, because you can't do it any other way. Gear Bunny Classic says the economic systems watch for it to go negative to detect overflow. But the exact number is 2 to the 31st power, so it's 214 plat, 748 gold, 36 silver, 48 copper. So they capped it at 200. So it would be more difficult to change. But again, mansion deeds are the way to go. I don't think it would be difficult to make mansion deeds vaultable, or house vaultable, I think that's just a flag in the SQL database. I think they can flag individual items to be things like tradable and vaultable. It is just an item in which the NPCs recognize as being valued at 25 plat. I don't think that's the issue here. And that would be something that you should submit via the feedback form and ask them to change it. So we're going to move on from plat. Let's talk a little bit about templating. And Gear Bunny Classic, who has just released the new version of Fusion, I think it's 1.127. That program, which is a phenomenal templating program. We'll talk a little bit about templating and how to template in a second, but I just want to plug that. It uses the most recent Dark Age of Camelot, updated item DB. So templating's complicated. If you're just returning to the game, the best thing that you can do is go to your king and get King's Gear. Generally speaking, and this is not always the truth, but generally speaking, templates for 8-mans will scale well into zerging. Not always. But the way I've always built my templates for 8 or for zergs is to think about the way in which it fits in a good group composition of 8 and then go from there. I want to do a resource podcast and I want to cover templating in more detail. To cover this one question about surprised to see an Eldritch with Sword and Board. So you generally get more utility out of having Sword and Board on a caster. It doesn't mean it's always right though. You run through a ton more power. There are issues with this. You get an extra slot to be able to do something, right? A staff is only one slot, and staff, like decent staffs in the game, depending on what class you're running, are relatively limited. With the Sword and Board, you have a little bit more variety to put more uses, more stat increases, more resists. There's a ton of variables. I have a Mana Eld, and I run a Sword and Board with that. The reason I run a Sword and Board is because I'm a Luri race. My intel is, first off, I don't have to go crazy to get high dex. I can get a ton more acuity or intelligence using Sword and Board that I can otherwise. And I've got enough power charges for it to not be a huge issue. There are some casters like Animist is a prime example that blows through, or Thurgist, right? Another great example, where they blow through so much power that you almost have to have a staff in order to be able to, or at least depending, I mean, it depends on your spec, but other than an Arb Animus, if you're Creep or Verd, you really need a staff. There's a lot of nuances to this. I could talk about this for a while. We'll do a full podcast on this. Gear Bunny Classic says the focus bonus from a staff just means using more power, but Sword and Shields offers up to 10 more stats. King's Gear plus Exemplar is also pretty suitable for most PvE. You need to get the better items, Gear Bunny Classic says. So if you're returning to the game, the answer really is King's Gear, maybe a King's Gear weapon, but start going through the quests or find a friend that has bounty points. I mean, just honestly, you could just join a really great guild. That's one of the things that we want to talk about in the resource podcast. Joining a good guild, and the good guilds, generally speaking, have vaults of items, and if you commit to running with them, if you commit to actually playing and giving it a shot, at least my guild, we've got more stuff than we know what to do with, and we can help template you out. And that's true of many guilds on all 3 realms. They will absolutely go the extra mile. A good guild is, especially if you're a returning player, new player, you have to get a guild. I've talked about resources and the lack of them on this podcast before. One of the things that Broadsword has said to me is that they would love to hear your feedback on resources. If you've got ideas about guides that you want to see, send those in. Beeb is probably the best person to talk to, being the community lead. Also the person who writes a lot of this stuff. Send your feedback in to Broadsword. Send it in. Because if there's a particular resource guide you're looking for, they may have an opportunity to build it for you. The community needs to do more, though. I think Broadsword there's a moment for Broadsword to, maybe in this new Herald site that they're going to release, maybe, I think we talked about a wiki page, a wiki site that Broadsword runs internally. It's theirs. They own it. They can manage it. We know it's going to be up. We know it's not going to be sold off, or hosting's going to go down somewhere. I could launch a wiki tomorrow and point the community to it. But what happens if I get hit by a bus tomorrow? Or what happens if I decide that I'm no longer interested in playing the game and don't want to host it anymore? So we need more content creation. AKA Extraterrestrial says IMO Broadsword should definitely do more sponsored content creation. What I've been told is they want to know what you want, is really what it comes down to. What kind of content do you want to see? What kind of resource guides do you want to see? Send that feedback in. We're going to move on to the next question. What's the key to good group comps? What's required for an 8-man small man versus Zerg as a returning player to teach, trying to teach several new players how to play the game? Team comp is one of the hardest aspects of the game to hammer home. Should have taken, says Hibs and mids build group easier as Alb need a Sork and a Cleric Friar to do what a Bard and Healer can do. Yes. When Albs have a great group composition, they have some of the best utility as a combined group, as a combined 8-man in the game. It's unbelievable what a solid, well-built 8-man on Alb can do. We can do a whole thing on this. And if you guys want to see that, we should. It's not something I think I can address in less than an hour on the podcast. What I would say is that based on what I've seen right now on all three realms, the real issue is with Albs running speed or lack thereof. Albs not getting the benefit of running a Minstrel. Bards are not an issue to come by on Hib. Champs are. Champs are really important. Even for caster groups to have peels, champs are really important. Like, I'm just bouncing all over the place. I would say there's a significant number of players in the game that just think a pug group is all that they can do. Like, that might be at the limit of their potential. You throw 8 people in a group, and if it looks like relatively sane, then that's like the best you're going to get out of the game. And so they don't try and push themselves further. It feels better. When I ran with Zoo, right? Like that group on Alb is phenomenal. They don't always run a Thurgist, right? They don't, sometimes they sub some things in depending on what the landscape looks like. They log in and they don't always play what they want. They play based on, what like last night, right? Zoo's crew ran a ton of, I think Zoo was on his Ice Wizard. There were some Necro Bombs because they weren't going to find any open field action. They don't always run a perfect group setup, but they tailor it. They've got the knowledge to tailor the group. And the more players that I think gain that, the better we'd all be. Gear Bunny Classic says, I wish they had given mid their 16th class, but they probably were having trouble balancing that. Beach Chicken says, it's always when Albs have a good group composition. Newsflash, outside of IRC 8-mans, Albs never have a good group composition. That's not always true. I mean, you need 5 or 6 Albs, right, to really fill out all of the needs of the group. But then you're probably short on DPS. Next question, does DAoC advertise? I haven't seen any around. I mean, outside of what Beeb does on places like Facebook, I don't really know. They certainly don't. I don't think they run paid ads for the game. I have seen people run ads for the game, including myself. I spend quite a bit of money on Facebook ads every month. Maybe if they were in a different store, like maybe if they were in Steam and they wanted to promote some of their content, that might work. But we're far out. We're not going to talk about Steam. We're way far out. The point is, I don't think they advertise. They might have a reason to when the new Classic server comes out, but right now they don't. So you'll see my ads. There was some random person that we came across that had a page called Dark Age of Camelot that was running ads like they were Broadsword. Like, newsflash, it wasn't Broadsword. And I messaged the person on Facebook and I asked them, like, who are you? I want to know what you're doing. Like, this seems like great that you're throwing money at this. Nobody seems to really care all that much. And they said just a player that enjoys the game and just wants to see it grow. It's pretty wild. There are people that put their own money forward. And really, like, the ads that I run, they're for the stream. I'm not going to say they're advertising for the game. It's not really like straight out game ads, but I see it benefiting the game for sure. Yeah, I mean, the more people that watch the stream, because this is really all I do, the more people that watch the stream, I think the more people that would be interested in playing. We've seen people come back to the game because of streams, and not just mine. Let's go back to chat, and let's just catch up on what some people are talking about. Saki says, Adit over here, says, generally, best alb comp is Sork, Cab, Thug, Arms, Pally, Mini, Friar, Cleric. Not a ton of DPS, but with the amount of CC that alb setup brings to the table, you can kill. Right, because the survivability is way higher. Yeah, DPS is not great, but there's a lot of versatility in that. You've got all the peels you could ever need. You've got tons of CC. You've got a lot of interrupts on the front and the back. There's so much versatility in that setup to be able to interrupt the backfield and distract whatever you're hitting. You've got a body train there, like a small body train. Yeah, that is really the golden standard setup on Alb. And it's like a very particular thing. Alb has got that like one group setup that is really the gold standard for Alb, where mids and Hibs have a lot more flexibility in the way that they can build those groups. Pronder says EA holds the cards for putting the game on Steam. That is absolutely true. They do hold the cards. They also have the Origin store, which is, I think, the reason why it hasn't been on Steam. And I don't know how much of a benefit it would see being... and this is just real talk. What's the benefit for DAoC being on Steam at this point? Is it, organic exposure? Are you going to point people to the link where they can download the game? Like, it's... So, there might be some more traffic that ends up, like, looking at the game that way, or people who are former players going, oh my god, like, I didn't know that existed, right? How many people... My fear is that if it goes on Steam, how many people are going to rate it low? Because they're just toxic. Or they're like, yay, free shard, right? Which is... Bleh. Pronder says, I think of the genesis of TOA may have been for a fourth realm, but it turned into what it is. That's an interesting idea. Should have taken says, each realm excels individually. Albs have a ton of pet classes, mid have charge groups, and Hibs are littered with heals. Play those to their strengths, and they are easy to form. Yep. AKA Extraterrestrial says exposure and appearing in a friends list is playing. A friends list, actually, that's a great point. I didn't think about that on Steam. There's definitely a benefit to that, too. Beach Chicken 20 says, given how old the game is and the data mechanics, I doubt there would be a significant long-term population gain, which is what this game desperately needs. This game, in my opinion, has some of the best player versus player mechanics that exist in any MMO. Period. Should have taken says, Alb Tank Train has to have a tick with AoE snare. It erupts. It's your erupts and your gap closes. Yeah. Well, in the tick rank 5. Oh, you just said that too. I was just thinking the tick rank 5 is amazing. Legan is questioning whether Albs can form a tank train. They can. Should have taken suggests an Alb tank train should be a Friar, Cleric, Minstrel, Tick, Armsman, Paladin, and any other tanks. Great point. The other thing I want to talk about really quickly is population too, RP bonuses. I touched on this last week. I want to say this again. I think it's important to note. I don't like the way RP bonuses work. That's just my personal opinion on things. I don't like the way they're displayed. I don't like the way they work. When the system was implemented in the beginning, it made a lot of sense. They were trying to keep people locked in a realm. We're trying to get underpopulated realms, like bolstering them in some way. I just don't like it because people log in, they see that realm bonus, and immediately see that they have an 80% bonus because they're underpopulated, and they log, and they don't even give it a shot. And I really, really, really want to see that removed from the game. I don't think that other realms should know what the population of the other realm is. I really don't. I don't see the benefit to it. Back in the good old days, there was really no idea of what the population looked like before you got out in RVR'd. And the mystery of that, I think, draws people in, right? Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think it draws people in. I think it makes a big difference. Chad is still talking about group compositions. And while, unfortunately, the podcast isn't going to be able to see all of this or any of it, I really hope that we will do a podcast on resources, group compositions, all of this stuff. And Righteous says, referring to population bonuses, until you read the count and you keep saying 120 Hibs killed your guards. That's true. There's too many people in this game that log in, that look at that bonus, and they go, and they turn around. And by the way, this idea that like not displaying it for the first 10 minutes that you're online is going to somehow change something. There was almost a little bit of a fatal oversight in that, is that people have conversations with one another, and people who log in 10 minutes like earlier than the other person are probably going to tell you what the population is. Looking at it on a whiteboard, it makes a ton of sense. Initially, as it was implemented, it makes a ton of sense. The game has just evolved, and I don't think it works the same way. Gear Bunny Classic reminds us all, people used to make friends in other realms just to find out how many there were in the frontiers. And trying to figure out before, like if you didn't know IRC, or if you didn't have a guild that was represented on multiple realms, before Discord came along, it was really tough to make those friends. Maybe you had them through some other method or some other means, but that was tough. Should have taken says you don't even have to wait 19 minutes. Just don't use the quick login, and you can see the bonuses when you pick the realm. You meant the 10-minute bonus, yeah, or the 10-minute the timer, which again doesn't make a ton of sense as to why it's displayed. Gear Bunny Classic says some guilds flat out advertised, "Hey, we're going to E-main, bring everyone to the field by the keep for a big fight." Neck checks. There are still setup fights in the game. We actually had this. This came up earlier today when I was running the HIB BG. It's really tough leading a BG to determine whether it's like legitimate intel or if it's intel from somebody who's cross-realming or if people are just shouting and spewing nonsense. Very difficult to be able to tell whether it's legitimate or not. We'll end up face planning. Usually it's just pure luck. Legan and I had conversations after the BGs have run. And by the way, Legan and I do not discuss where we're going to be, what the fights are going to look like. We don't set up fights. Like, none of that happens between Legan and I, ever. Or anybody else that has any sort of decision-making ability or is feeding. Like, that just doesn't happen between BGs. I know Legan doesn't do that with any other BG. Definitely with mine. It doesn't happen. There are some BGs that set up fights. I'm sure of that. But it doesn't really happen with the US primetime folks. Now, there are oftentimes situations where realms will gang up on a third realm. Two realms will gang up and work together to hit a third realm. Broadsword says that's totally fine. It's totally legal. It's above board. More power to you. Those have been really interesting evenings where mids and albs have ganged up on HIB when I've been on HIB. I don't remember that ever happening when I was on alb. Probably for a lot of reasons. Maybe it did happen, but I don't know. AK Extraterrestrial says there's definitely some level of you guys knowing each other really well. Literally the other night you said in chat, he's going to go into the keep and going right because he always goes right. It's true that Legan and I don't always know for sure, but I have a sense of where Legan's going to go. Just because I know Legan, and I also know Legan's playstyle really well. There have been so many occasions where I've totally got it wrong and ended up killing the BG as a result of getting it wrong. Should have taken, mentions macro groups. We should talk about macro groups. When they banned macro groups, a lot of those tunes became free account spies. They parked them in Benno and Safe Path to see where boats are going and who leaves down Safe Path. There are lots of people who used to do this. Not so much anymore. Mid had at least 2 or 3 people that ran separate hunters and would go out and like place those hunters in particular areas or would run shadow blades to be able to get climb in and out and would give us some like a really good run for our money because there would be legitimate intel. Babama Lama, because I had it written down. I know how to pronounce your name now, says, can you still do macro groups even on veteran accounts? I don't see the constant PL plat cell spam that used to be in chat last time I played. Yeah, so you cannot macro team in New Frontiers, but you can macro just about anywhere else. You can macro in DF. You can macro in ML10, or is it ML9? I always get them confused. POC, any PvE place you could do, it's just fine. It's no issue. So RVR dungeons are always okay. Labby, you can't run them in straight out New Frontiers. There are situations where CSRs will warn people if they're running what looks like a macro team from Bold, like together, from a macro team from like Bold to POC or Glen to POC or whatever, Neged to POC. If CSRs see that, they will actually warn, or to Labby, they will warn those people. If you don't break that clump of characters up, like you're going to get actioned. You have to run them one at a time in New Frontiers. You cannot run a macro team together, even if you're not going to do anything with them. You can't run them together. John says macro groups, this is before they changed the rules. Macro groups have been a popular topic for almost the entire life of Dark Age of Camelot. Our stance on them right now is the same it's always been. If we can determine that they are using a third-party program to do it, we action them. It's really that simple. It's a violation. We don't want it. It was just a matter of trying to figure out whether the key presses were happening at the same time or not, or if there was some other evidence that was submitted. So this was in January of 2016 where this changed. The reason this changed is because there was a huge stink made on post count. And I was part of that push. I was getting so fed up with it. The idea that you could buy 5 or 6 accounts, 7 accounts, 8 accounts, whatever. You could run them all at the same time. You know, you could make the argument that they were easy to kill, but you still had to have the money to run all those accounts. You had to have a decent system to do it, which put you at an unfair advantage against people that were running 1 or 2 characters at the most. There's like Avel, I think, who's in and out of Discord all the time talking about bring macro teams back. I think that's Abel. You want to bring macro teams back because you have the system to run it. You've got the money to spend. And you think it's funny when one person with the financial resources can literally wipe entire BGs or entire groups. I just don't find that super fun. Sorry, I just don't. And I made a stink about it. A lot of people made a stink about it on post count. And ultimately, Broadsword changed their stance on it because there was a lot of feedback that was submitted. I'm really quite proud of Broadsword rounding the bend on this and just saying, okay, look, we're going to put our foot down when it comes to certain things. They've always been against radar. They've always been against third-party programs that give you an unfair advantage. In fact, up until this letter, they were against third-party programs that allowed you to do things like twist on a pally or one button and multiple spells on one tune. You couldn't legally do that up until this letter came out, and now you can. So there was a lot of like good that came out of this process. Removing macro teams from New Frontiers was also, in my opinion, a very good thing. B-Bomb says, I remember Team Wizzy would bomb towers and farm in millions of RPs. We had a ton of RPs. Team Wizzy was insanity. My issue back then was DF. It was when I was really upset in DF. Was trying to run raids in DF. And still to this day, macro teams run DF all the time. This, and in fairness, this letter and the rule change doesn't affect anything in DF. But the thing that really upset me the most is that I was trying to run Legion raids. I was trying to run princes. We were trying to get seals. We were doing the seal raids to try and get decent gear. And at one point or another, Hero would come down and wipe us, which is whatever, because they'd get wind of it. Or macro teams would come along and they would blow us up. And that really upset me. Macro teams are down there. Most of these macro teams are down there because they're for profit. They're not all of them, but there are more than a handful of macro teams that run and collect BPs and create gear and all sorts of stuff for profit. And that just like really upset me that like players couldn't get a fair shot at getting these seals that we had. Anyway, it didn't change anything in DF, but that was part of the reason why I was really upset. There have been some changes that have been made over the course of time. And I'm really happy that they've, Broadsword has come around and made those changes. They've learned. For anybody that says that they don't listen, you're like flat out wrong. They do listen. They listen to feedback. They listen to people. They listen to the community to gauge how upset the community is on one particular like of an issue versus another. Fu is talking about auto crafting. Crafting is kind of a fringe thing now. It's not a fringe thing because people still need it, but crafting was way more important in the early days of the game because you had to craft multiple pieces of gear, and there were none of these amazing Renvik hats or crafting bonuses. It was so tough. Now it's a little bit easier. In fact, it's really easy to level up in crafting, and I think there's some hope that it's still this kind of niche thing where people are going to make plat off of things like spell crafting and armor crafting. AKA Extraterrestrial says, as a former macro team runner, I put myself through college by power leveling people. I always felt like PvE and PvP were very different experiences. I never set foot in a PvP zone, and I'm glad the rules have been laid out. Prounder Norris says, proving stream sniping beyond an accusation is hella hard, though. So we're talking about stream sniping. Stream sniping is not illegal. We can all have different opinions on this. I don't like it. I don't want people to watch my stream to get information. I hate that. But people do it all the time. And like, I'm living with it now. I'm living with the reality of the situation. I'm going to get stream sniped. It's just going to happen. And how is Broadsword going to know? If they can't prove that there are players in Discords, like listening, or if people are dual logged, because it's frankly not, it doesn't require a technically savvy person to, I guess, get around that. How are they going to prove that you're stream sniping? And like, anything that involves outside of the game, they just don't have any control over unless they can prove it. And even then. And Borgio points out that that's why we as streamers run a delay of your choosing. I run a variable delay every night. I change it, maybe not every night, but like every other night or every couple of nights, I change it by a minute or two. Whether it's over or under, I always tell everybody it's 5 minutes. It's not 5 minutes. I'll never tell you what it is. But my stream delay is always floating. And when I do like the duo streams with Bammers, I think it's a 10 or 15 minute delay. Fu says, sorry, I was on a fight. I mentioned auto-crafting, talking about, like you said, macro spell, etc. I find it absurd that something like affects gameplay RVR, even if just making someone lazy, like dual binding spells, is fine. But macroing crafting in a game 20 years old, and when the only use for crafts are at max level, unlike any other games, is just absurd. Crafting, I will say that crafting, I don't think, has caught up with the state of the game right now. But it's worked so far, and there's not a population that's suffering from a lack of crafters, so I don't think it's a priority. But sure, there are things I think that could be done. I mean, there have been some changes to crafting that have made it easier, and they've increased the amount of skill gain that you can make. But besides that, like, could they retool it? Absolutely. They could retool it. Will they? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not Broadsword. I don't work there. They don't provide me a paycheck. I don't know. Add it to the list of the many things that could be done. And they have to, as a community, I think we all would prefer that they prioritize certain things over others. Well, we've now got somebody and that's fine. Hello, how are you? Talking about IRC cheating. We're not going to go into that. I talked the first state of the game. I would encourage you to go all the way back in the archives. It's on YouTube. It's in podcast form as DAoC State of the Game. I think the first one is episode 6. It's a bonus episode. Go back, or you'll see it. It's like our first state of the game. The first 20 or 30 minutes, we talk about Zoo's crew and cheating. You should go back and listen to it. I think I lay out a whole host of reasons. And I will oftentimes make fun of Tom. And Tom's like a really sweet guy too. But I'll make fun of Tom with, like, the water jokes and stuff, whatever. I just don't see any evidence of them actively cheating today. I just don't. I don't know. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just saying I don't... You really would have to point me to some kind of solid evidence that shows that they're doing something. Other than just, like, building a really good group comp, running together all night long. There's a lot of pressure in that group to perform. Hexo says you can macro craft on the free shard. In those places, crafting is far more important than it is on live right now. It's just a different game. It's a totally different game than what is like on the official live servers. And in some places you might need crafting more than others. And on Yuan, you just don't. It's not a huge requirement. I talked also in the first state of the game about how there are different tiers of competitive players. Or different tiers of players, all the way from people that log in for social hour, which is totally fine, and you should be able to do whatever you want. It's your $15. If this is how you connect with your folks and your friends and whatever, by all means, make it social hour. There are people that play in a BG but don't really care so much about their performance, just want to see some really cool spell effects, want to feel like they're adding to the game and making, some important contribution. And so they're cool with dying every time as long as they get that spell effect and they feel like they're contributing. There are people that play in BGs that know their groups. There are people that play in BGs that could be pulled out and put in an 8-man and run independently of the BG. Then there's the competitive groups like Creeper and Oddballs and, Jesse's group when they're really well forward with Chaos Knight. Those folks. And then there's the esports, like very competitive players, which is usually Zeus crew. And scroll the game back 15 years, you would have a lot. In fact, you had a ton more of these groups that roamed. A ton more. In fact, a lot of people that still play to this day got a lot of their skill from running with those IRC groups of yesteryear. It's just because the game, there's been attrition over the course of time, that there's really only one, like maybe sometimes 2 competitive 8-mans that are out. Like ultra esports level, like highly competitive. But you could go to any other game. I don't care what you name, any game that's out there. If it's an MMORPG, if it's everybody from CS:GO to Apex Legends to World of Warcraft. Name any other game out there, and they've got the same tier of players. There's nothing different here on DAoC. It's just, I think it hurts a little more because there's just it's a small base of these really ultra competitive players. It's just there's not a ton of them left. And so it makes it, you can absolutely kill IRC. You can kill Zukru. You just have to play really smart. It's just a matter of like understanding what classes they're on. If Tom's on Yama, if there's a minstrel in that group, you can bet that I'm going to try and get in front of that group as fast as I can. Or I'm going to try and pull Tom out of the fight as fast as I can. Killing him is not the solution. Doing everything else to Tom humanly possible. It sounds like I'm going to torture the guy. Like Zephyring him out. Or putting an ST on him. Or whatever. To prevent him from clicking sauce. Because he's got sauce 5. And at that point, they're gone. Unless you can get out in front of them and put a warp on him. Gear Bunny Classic says, crafting on live is just to make a couple of patch items you can't get in a drop or quested. Right. It is one, usually it's one item that helps fill in a spot in a template. Sometimes in like really good templates, that is not a crafted item, but it's a ROG. But for people who are building off-the-shelf templates, and a ROG for people who don't know stands for Random Object Generator. It is it's a system in the game that drops items that have different stats every time. If you don't, and really, really good temps that are not shared, they can't be shared because the like core component of it is a ROG that can't be like easily replicated or replicated at all. You have to have a crafted piece, and that's why crafted pieces still exist, because frankly, there's been so many items added to the game over the course of time now. There's so many options to choose from. Adit says killing his pet, meaning Thomas. Thomas. There's also a journalist named Tom Yama. But it's not YAMA. It's not Tom Yama, but it's pretty close. Tom Yamas. Anyway, I know Tom. I know Tom back when he was in South Florida. Back in my old career of yesteryear. Pronder says, look at Gear Bunny Fusion and sort by utility, and we will see some artifacts that still, to this day, have hella high utility, just maybe not high bonus level. Legan says, if I see IRC, it's usually me telling people to fight, but in my mind, I'm just saying, foo. Yeah, we know how you're going to finish that. The same thoughts cross my mind when I run into Zoo face first, but the thing that drives me is like just the challenge of getting in front of them. All I want to do is just get in front of them and get the kill. That makes me so happy. Look, Zoo's crew thrives on that challenge. They challenge each other all night. They challenge people that fight them all night. They thrive on that. If there wasn't a challenge, they wouldn't be here. Makes them happy to get the Rammet kill too. It's a little easier for and don't get me wrong, like I've got really good group. I've got amazing healers in the group. Ramfis, Vywin, and Lurie are all like amazing healers. And with Frosh on Bard, it's tough to kill me, but it's easier to kill me than it is to kill any one of the folks in Zeus crew. But sure, I'm a target, and like whatever, that's cool. Okay, all of this is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. And our Patreon supporters are literally that and the Twitch subs too. The subscribers on Twitch are an enormous boost to the stream. And the Patreon supporters, in addition to getting all sorts of fun benefits, you also get access to exclusive content. I just posted I can't log in and show you here, but I just posted a brand new fight recap video, which contained all of the fights from last week. Or not all of them, but most of them. The full-length videos are only available to Patreon supporters, and you can find all of that at patreon.com/ramicmedia. We've got Siambra and Pronder, which are Beard Crew members. That is a $50 commitment a month. That's the highest level of support. Borgio and Beeb with Tier 3, It's Not Over. That's the Tier 3 supporters. Bellamar is our Tier 2 supporter, which is Saving the Game. And then we've got AKA Extraterrestrial, which is our brand new Patreon supporter. God's Demon, Neomatrix, Ollie, Keed, Veneer, and Bloodcore. Thank you guys so much for supporting the stream and everything that we do. And those Patreon supporters get exclusive access to all the full-length videos. And there's a lot of stuff that I haven't released on YouTube that is only available to Patreon subs. So I would highly encourage you to go and check that out. Okay. I'm really glad that you guys stuck around. I'm glad that you hung out with me. Thank you for asking all sorts of questions. Thanks for letting me ramble. I greatly appreciate it. Until next time, be safe, wear a mask. See you guys tomorrow. Have a great night.